All right, seeing none, the monthly budget report.
Hey, you can tell the students that if they want to stay and listen on their own.
If you want to stay and listen, if you want to go, yeah.
Okay.
All right. All right, Tim, monthly budget report.
The revenue for the month of August was $6.1 million. Again, we're receiving the property taxes at the August 1st deadline, so the receipts in July and August have been very high. For the total revenue for the first 2 months, we're actually at 42% of budget because of that. On the expenditure side, we had total expenditures $1,578,000. And for the first 2 months, we were at 12% of budget. Through the first 2 months, we're at about 16% of our fiscal year. So, that number in terms of expenditures is right in line with where we should be. I also reported out that the operating fund balances at the end of August, $13,300,000. And that's an increase of almost $6 million from the beginning of the year in the first 2 months of the year. In your report, I also highlighted the operating fund balance percentage of operating expenditures for June 30th, 2013. It was budgeted to be 28.79%. The actual number came in at 37.12%. There had been a question about the cell tower revenue for fiscal 2013. Our revenue was $64,000. AT&T paid $22,000 of that. They're currently paying $1,898 a month. Verizon paid almost $42,000 of that, and they're currently paying $3,493 a month. And Sprint's payments are still abated until December of 2013. I included in your the packet a report from Eris Dalianis, our attorney at Franzik Radlick, who handles the property tax appeals, and he highlighted the the property tax appeals that are outstanding. The larger ones that come in at a little over $1 million, so it would justify, I think, the $848,000 that we budgeted for next year. I'm sure that's not going to all come in, but I think the budget number is justified based on the potential refunds that are out there.
Does that include how he did the, I know there was a board member question on how he comes up with his determination. Is that the chart they should be looking at for that?
Well, I think what he does, he's looking at the $1,082,000 in potential refunds that are out there. He's not coming up with a number for us, but he's saying that the $848,000 that we've had budgeted for the past few years is a reasonable number based on that.
Based on the million that's
Based on the
potential.
million that's potentially out there.
I mean, one would ask, Tim, I'm sure if they're not gonna ask, they're gonna possibly ask, is there a reason why we don't budget $1 million or $1,082,000?
Well, I think it's a percentage type of thing. I mean, if the potential is $1,082,000, the likelihood that 100% of that's gonna come in next year is, is low, so that you're not gonna budget $1 million, but I don't think you wanna budget $200,000 or $300,000.
Tim, the document I see here is actually the potential exposure is almost $1.5 million, all right?
What he said.
You got a grouping for the Riverside Mall, which is $1,082,000, but then you got the other grouping up above.
With 357.
Yeah, 357, right?
Yeah, so it's even higher than that.
Yeah. So our potential exposure's closer to $1.5 million in refunds. Okay.
John, does this answer your question, or at least give you some direction on what you were asking last week or 2 weeks ago?
Because Tim really hasn't answered the question of where's that percentage coming from?
What percentage you?
850 over 1.5 million. I mean, there's got to be some rationale behind that number. I mean, I could come up with
That's
historical.
Okay, if we go back about 4 years, we paid out about $850,000. That's the highest we've had in the last 4 years.
But I think the question is, historically, how have these type of appeals turned out? that should be the analysis. So we got 1.5 million, what's the, most likely scenario?
Well, I don't know what the most likely scenario is. I don't know if the attorney can tell you that. He can tell you what the potential is that's out there.
So
But
they
he's not
don't.
gonna commit to what he thinks the likelihood is gonna be.
Mr. Walsh.
Well, I think what John's asking, Tim, if I'd state it a different way, is based on our attorney's experience, or if there's data on the history of the success on a percentage of these appeals, is there some indicators you can rely on to say why we should do 850 when we have 1.5 million out there? I mean, I think John, to tell you the truth, has a stronger point now. It seems like there's not a basis for it. It's a number we used before, and we don't know how that number compared against what the outstanding appeals at the time were either. So, again, I don't know if they publish the data, John, but, somebody like our firm, if they have expertise, they should have some indication that, on average, at this stage, you get 50%, 70%, 20%, or they could, John, turn around and say, it's just this very uncertain. So we think that because of the uncertainty, the best choice is to just keep maintaining the budget the way we have.
So Tim, let me ask you another question. Do you run this 848,000 by areas and say, is that reasonable, or is that?
Yes, that's exactly what I don't ask him to give me a number. I tell him, this is what we've budgeted in the past. Is this a reasonable number? Okay. Now, I thought the question last month was, what's the potential that's out there and how does that compare with what we've budgeted? I can go back to him and ask him to come up with some kind of percentage.
I would
if
just,
he's willing to do that.
I would just say that, the board had questions because we're basically only budgeting about a 50% risk. So is that low, is that high, or is that, historically, that's usually what we end up paying? Just see if there's some process that he
Do we
would
have any,
recommend.
do we have any historical data? I would assume that there should be a table over the past 10 years, what the risk was, what the loss was.
I think Tim mentioned, didn't you say
Well-
that you have historicals for 4 years?
I've gone back about 4 or 5 years, and as I say, going back that far, there was a year where we paid about $800 and some thousand back in tax refunds. It's only been that high once in the past 4 or 5 years.
But when it was that high, what percentage of the risk was that?
That information I don't have. I'd have to ask the attorney to put that together if he has it.
Is that something the board wants to know?
I think that's reasonable,
Okay,
if we can do it.
that's John. Laura, I'm assuming then you want it? 2 more?
Well, I think we
What are
should,
you asking for?
The attorney to compile historical data for us.
You know what, I'd rather,
Potential.
Tim, what I'd rather you do is come up with a rational approach, that you create a logical budgeting approach going forward. So for example, I'm seeing here, it's, tax year 2008, 2009. Is there some rationale that says it takes 5 years for it to go through PTAB? Or is it Harry, and it just, whenever they get to it, they get to it? Is there, is that the likelihood these are gonna be resolved this year, or are they gonna be out there for another 10 years? I would suggest you come up with a budgeting rationale, once you get this type of report that, throws probabilities on it with the, and then you come up with a rational approach to your budgeting this
but I think
going forward. We don't know. This is you look at the years here, these are years just at the time of the peak of the financial crisis. So is the PTAB gonna look at it, the valuations of property different than they did prior to the peak? You don't know. There could be a total change in the way they approach this. What I would suggest we do is that Tim comes up with a logical approach to budgeting these refunds. We as a board are comfortable with that approach going forward, and that would put the whole thing to bed. I don't know if history is a good indicator of this or not.
I think probably a little history on what we've paid out should be lying around somewhere already.
Well, we
Tim
have,
probably
he
has
already
that.
mentioned that, he
Says
has
what we
that.
paid out.
I can give you the historical information on
Payouts.
what we've paid out. What I'm gonna do is go back to the attorney and say,
Right.
can you give me the historical information by year on what was potential. I don't know if he can do that.
When we pay it out, does he provide you a document that says it's this docket number and here's the, or does he just give you a number and say, pay this to the account?
Actually,
He
it
does-
just comes out of the treasurer's office without us doing
Okay.
anything.
Because the only way, and again, we don't really want to pay our attorney $400 or $500 an hour to do this analysis, but what they should be able to do is have a clerk or somebody there send you a copy of the, they've been represented for years, of the court rulings and the appeals, and it'll say when the docket was filed, what they asked for, and what they got, and you'll know when the payment was due, and you could put that in a table and put numbers
And
together on
then
it.
again comes up a rational approach to how to budget.
I
So
agree.
if you want to go on history, if it's still a good indicator, I don't know and P-TABs take X number of years to go through. This was filed Y number of years ago. We don't think it's going to hit this year, or we think it's going to hit this year. And typically it comes in at a percent of X to Y, and then you can come up with a logical approach to the budget.
Isn't it as simple as this? I mean, we asked him, is this number reasonable?
Yeah.
He said yes. And isn't the next question, why?
Okay.
Okay.
Tim will have a summary for you all by the October cow. And what I'm hearing from the group, if I may repeat or summarize, is that we prefer not paying the attorney to do most of this work, trying to
Right.
pull what we have locally just to see, right?
I agree.
Yes.
Okay,
He may be able to just tell us why, Kevin, without really
Yeah.
doing much.
okay.
I agree. All right.
Keep
Tim,
going,
okay.
Tim.
There were several questions on the financials. One involved one of the summer athletic camps,
Page number?
page number 11. Had to do with wrestling summer camp. We deposited $1,700. We had $1,700 in revenue in the month of August. The question related two parts. One, the report from last month showed $1,760 in revenue. We did have $60 that came in the month of June. The other was why there was no other significant revenue for any other sports. Wrestling started in late July, so the revenue is coming in later. A lot of the camps start in June, so payments are being made in May and June. The revenue that we have for the summer camps is split over the 2 years, so that the camps that we had this summer, some of those payments were made in June, so they're in the fiscal 13 financials. Some were paid in July or in August, they're in the fiscal 14 financials. So you can't really look at the financials and look at it and see the revenue and say, this was the revenue we had for the camp. That's why we provided the reports that are put together that showed the revenue and then the expenditures.
I think the board, just to refresh the board's memory too, we didn't hire a wrestling coach till I want to say May or June. So his time for him to put together his camp was a little later than everybody else.
All right.
Okay.
Next question.
There was a question on a contribution, $10,807.
What page?
That's on page 12. That was money that came in from the auditors. That's when they closed their books and sent us a check for the balance that they had at the time.
Okay.
On page 24, there was a question regarding retirement stipends. Question of what the difference was between the retirement stipends on this page and the retirement stipends that are on page 40. Retirement stipends that are in this 1130 accounts, which is the instructional accounts, are the additional incentives, the $25,000 incentives that were given to two people to retire earlier than they had originally anticipated. The retirement stipends that are included in the 2310 accounts on page 40 are the balances that are being paid of the $25,000 contractual incentives that the people receive, and some of that money is spread over the 4 years that they're getting raises. There was a question regarding the summer school revenues. I think I've addressed that. And there was also a question regarding the descriptors. The headers that we have on the financials that show fund, account number, description, The headers aren't gonna change. What we could change is we can change the descriptions themselves, but we'd have to go through here and literally change every description to put in supplies for math, supplies for English,
I guess I was suggesting it different. In the budget, you put the numbers, and then you put the word that describes it, one set of columns, another set of columns. In this report, there's just, I use this as an example, there's like 50 line items that say the same thing, and unless you know what the code is on one of them, you have no idea what they're for. So the treasurer said he has a robust reporting, give it electronically. I'm just trying to say, can't we enhance this report by using a similar format to the budget and just put the descriptors for the numbers in there so that people can look at it and just know what it's for?
I can go into their system and look at it and see, like in supplies here, which is the one you highlighted.
Well, I highlighted that because it sticks out so much,
yeah,
but it's true
so-
throughout the whole report.
Right. So I can go in and look at it and see if there's another descriptor that pertains to, if those are math supplies, English supplies, that type of thing, and see if we can get that in there. Otherwise, we'd have to go in and change all the descriptions by hand, just go in.
Well, no, I'm,
So,
I'll say it one more time. When you brought the treasurer here, I specifically asked him, what kind of reporting tools do you have? Because thinking about this one, it'd be helpful to know what the codes stand for. And he stated, we've got a great system, it's electronic, we can send the data pretty much any way you want, so, and we're paying him, we paid him 60 grand this year. Why don't we ask him if he can help us make this report more useful?
Do we put the accounts in, or do they put the accounts in?
the descriptions,
Mm-hmm.
They're in there now.
they're in there now, I'm sure.
I'm
We've
assuming
put
they've
them
probably been in there for the last, because
Yeah.
it's a DOS system, the
in. Yeah.
elaborate system they have. It's a
Let me see
DOS
if there's
system.
more description.
I'm not.
Pull out.
He was overselling
That was just
himself.
before the abacus.
Try to get
I didn't even know
DOS
they
on your
had that
iPhones.
anymore.
Tim will look at it.
Thank you.
Okay, and then there was a question regarding, budget transfers, and some of the couple of the items that were highlighted were the accounts that we have set up for flood damage. Just a note on the flood damage accounts, right now, we have in the budget, $18,500 set up to cover the flood damage. So far in this fiscal year, we've processed $13,600 in expenses. The budgeted revenue is $22,000. The whole flood damage, the process, it was kind of a fluid kind of thing. We're probably actually gonna receive about $34,000 from the insurance, reimbursement for flood damage. So some of these expenditures may be a little bit higher, but the revenue is also gonna be significantly higher.
That wasn't the point of the question, Tim.
Yeah.
The question was
The
on the
question was an
Question was
example.
on the budget.
I asked before, and it's supposed to be on the list of a future meeting and I sent you the document about, the state documents say in certain instances you have to transfer within a account, and other times you have to transfer between them. And I asked an explanation of when do we have to transfer within an account? And I used this example as saying, when you get to that, maybe you could use that, because we budgeted 0 on 2 items and we've incurred more than 10,000. So when you do your presentation on how do we know when we need to transfer within an account or between, or I should say fund, within a fund or between funds, that could just be a potential example to use when you do that presentation.
Okay, I don't, in terms of once you set the budget, there's no real requirement that you transfer the budget numbers from one account to another.
Kevin, remember I sent the
Yeah.
actual documents from the state where they say that you
Right,
have
so
to
we,
do that, and you were gonna find out when it applies or not.
we were gonna talk about it, but in regard to the intra-fund transfer, that we've talked about this a few times, about not transferring between accounts once the budget's established, so that we know where the money was short budgeted and where we need to correct, and making sure that no budget goes over. I thought what Tim was supposed to look is what's the law for inter-fund. So if,
What I asked, he was gonna look at that, but in that same, I'll pull it out if you need me to send it to you again. It talks about when you have to do line item transfers intra-fund. The ISBA guidelines talk about it, and it's, you know, I asked somebody to find out when it actually applies, because we've never done it.
What do you have for us today? Did you pull up?
What I'm saying is, I don't think there's any requirement that if you're going to go over on a particular line item, over budget, that you change that budget amount so that you're not over. Okay, there's no requirement that you do that. And we've said before here that within a department, we want people to be under budget. So if you want to go over on your supplies, you come under on paid services.
What's the rule on the inter-fund? 10% of the budgeted amount, correct?
Yeah, but we don't make any transfers between funds other than working cash. And we don't really transfer the working cash, we loan the money to the other funds.
Okay, Mike, and tell me if I'm wrong on this one. When we first came in, they were transferring budget balances all over the place to make everything look, right? Am I right or wrong?
There were certain accounts that would go over budget, and then they'd take money from one account and put it to that account so that the next month it wouldn't be over budget.
So-
And you had the budget that you passed at the fall meeting, and then 3 or 4 months later, the budget amount was different on the books. And it was because they were making transfers within a department or within an area so that a specific line item then wasn't over budget. And back then, I suggested that we don't do that. We don't budget something and then change the budget mid-year, especially without anybody knowing about it, just going in and changing the budget so that the reports look better. It's kind of counterproductive, in my opinion, to change it so it looks better rather than leaving it where it was so we can know, hey, why was this account over budget and how can we correct it going forward on the next budget? And then as this board came around a couple of years ago, we indicated that, okay, if you're gonna go over in one, since I'm speaking English, we'll go English department. If you're gonna go over on supplies, then you gotta come under budget for the whole English department or the whole whatever department. And so there were times where, we'd asked him, well, why is this account over budget? And he says, well, their overall department was under budget, and he brought us examples of reports that show how the department was under budget as a whole, and that's something that they monitor. So as far as the budget amount, I don't think we should change the budget amount, and I don't think it's required that we do.
That was the only part I was trying to get a confirmation whether it's required or
How
not.
about we do this?
It may be something that the IASB suggests in their guidelines.
It does in the black
Well-
book that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Let's put this to rest. We have the auditor coming. Can you please make sure that he answers that question specifically on the inter and intra, and does he have any concerns with how we're
Right.
operating
And
in our
I did
approach?
talk to him today, if he knew of
That'd be
any
perfect.
requirement, he said no.
Oh, you did speak with the auditor?
Yes, I talked to him today. He can
Okay.
confirm that when he comes.
Okay,
Thank you.
good? All right. I think activity accounts is your next part, right?
Yeah, the activity accounts, I included in the packet, in my report, a description of some of the procedures for the activity accounts and then some of the forms that we use. And again, the payments, any payments out of activity accounts go through the same procedure as payments out of a board account. They have to be approved by an administrator, they come to the business office, we check to make sure there's enough money available to make the payments. And then the checks are cut and I sign off on the checks. The two things that are in policy, one of them says that, or in the administrative code that Mr. Walsh was quoting, says that the school board receives a monthly report that includes a statement of receipts, disbursements, and current balances. This is a copy as an example of what I had run today. This is the activity accounts. It's the activity from July 1 through today. Shows the beginning balance of each of the activity accounts. shows the income, it shows the expenses, any transfers, and then the ending balance as of today. As I mentioned, there's 164 different funds in our activity accounts. Total of about $317,000. This shows $290,000. Last week it was $317,000. But this is a report that's generated probably on a weekly basis in our office that I look at. There are some accounts that may go negative because we may spend money on something where there's going to be a fundraiser. We spend money in the bookstore before the students actually make the purchases. But again, when I get the requests and the checks, the person in my office is providing me with a balance that's in that activity fund. And so I know there's either enough money or there's going to be enough money through a fundraiser or through student purchases, that type of thing. But this is the kind of report that we could provide on a monthly or a quarterly basis if the board wanted that.
Kevin, I'm just gonna ask it a different way than I cited it. According to the ISB rules, it says the board's supposed to get a report every month. It doesn't appear to be discretionary, and it doesn't appear we can do it quarterly or annually, and, when and again, Tim, it's not a it's,
Mary Ann, can you close that door so I
when
can
you see,
hear?
at least me personally as a board member, when I see that, and it's like, all right, here's a state rule, which the rules are a law in Illinois.
That's
It seems pretty clear.
administrative code, I didn't recognize that.
And again, I'm not faulting necessarily for people not recognizing it, but, we talked about it when I was in the policy council, is how many of these rules, we have to make sure we comply with the law. That's, administrative rules of law in Illinois. So the law says you have to, whether we want to read another report or not, two things. One is we have to get it every month and look at it. And the second one is that at the end of the year, we have to make a decision on any balances where there haven't been activity during the year. And we, it seems like we should follow the rule and make sure that we do that on a monthly and an annual basis.
I have a call in to Todd about this administrative code, if that supersedes, or is that congruent to the Illinois school code?
The Illinois school code's here, the administrative code is both, they can't conflict with the code.
Right,
And then
but
our
I thought
policies
that-
can't conflict with the rules.
Right, so I thought the school code is what governs public schools, so that's why I want to see,
Oh, no, you've got to follow every administrative rule, too.
well, I have a call in to Todd, so I
Well,
want to.
I'm not giving you legal advice.
I just want to verify that. But
I'll tell you what the answer's going to be.
I do recognize what you're saying, and so we will make sure that we are in compliance with that. I just want to make sure that the board understands that with the reports that we keep, this is the format of the reports. So do you want these included with the monthly bills reports? That's a simple thing we can do.
Is that hard for you to do?
No,
Well, let's do it a different way. If our attorney comes back and says we actually have to follow the ISB rules, you don't ask us the question.
I'll
right?
just have it
We
in-
have to do it, right?
So Tim, why don't we just start with monthly, just,
all right, and I did say that I would start going through the accounts where there hasn't been activity and start closing those out.
okay.
The thing we have to be cautious with some of those accounts, well, the big one is the class accounts. Because there has been a past practice here where some of the class accounts just have that money sitting there and then they use it for their reunion, their 5 or their 10 or 20-year reunion. And then we've had some accounts come back and say, hey, we have this much remaining in our account after our reunion, the rest will be donated to the school to use as they wish. So Tim's gonna put in a process to check on that. And I have a call already into Todd, I'll follow up with him just about the two.
Okay. Anything else, Tim?
No,
Okay, any questions for Tim?